Now, Maria, I'll just start off with a question generally about the international community and what it can do to help Uganda improve its approach to human rights.
Well, there are many things we've been pushing for many years at Human Rights Watch. In February, there were elections and President Museveni was re-elected. That means that he's entering another 5-year term after 30 years in office. So our critical concerns have really been about ensuring that there can be free expression, that journalists won't be beaten up in the streets for recording opposition events, that people will be able to freely protest, that we'll start to see some prosecutions of torture, for example. And Uganda's really been a key ally of many countries in the war on terror, particularly focusing on East Africa. Uganda has troops in Somalia. So one of the things that we've been pushing, particularly the US and the UK, to do is to ensure that security forces are held accountable, to ensure that the military isn't deployed to violate the rights of Ugandans, that there's space to freely express themselves, and that we don't see what we've seen in many places, which is that trade-off, that in support of counterterrorism objectives, we see, less scrutiny of the domestic human rights situation.
In that same kind of realm, in terms of human rights bodies being threatened within Uganda, how are NGOs specifically being threatened, and what are the implications of that?
Yeah, we've documented a whole range of different kinds of threats to civil society groups in Uganda. We've had particular concerns about those that touch on finances. So, for example, groups that document land grabs and evictions, that look at oil and financial transparency in the oil sector. And then certain human rights groups, particularly those that work on the rights of LGBTI Ugandans, they've all faced different kinds of threats and intimidation over the last several years. And recently there's a new NGO law that's just been passed that's, troublingly enough, created a whole new series of crimes that only NGO workers can be found guilty of, and it can potentially put them in jail for 3 years. The language around that law is very vague. So, for example, it's a crime to violate the dignity of all Ugandans, with no definition of what that means or who's the judge of the dignity of all Ugandans. And we're very concerned that that gives the government a great deal of space to basically argue that anything the government doesn't like is potentially violating the dignity of all Ugandans. So we remain very concerned about what this will mean for civil society operating space, and we've certainly been urging the government and donors to Uganda to ensure that there is a more enabling environment for civil society.
You were previously the Human Rights Watch Burundi researcher, and there's been a lot of violence happening there over a long period of time, and it's definitely been intensifying. Can or should the international community do anything to stop this state-led violence?
Well,
In your
absolutely.
opinion?
It's been
Yeah.
a very, very bad year in Burundi. It had a real escalation and extrajudicial killings. We've seen the government's position really harden down, and at this point, I think the situation is absolutely tragic. We've been pushing in a lot of different areas to try to see space for improving the protection of human rights. The AU has agreed to send in some police advisors. We certainly hope that the UN will do its part to push harder on the government to ensure an improvement, both in terms of holding people accountable and in terms of stopping the ongoing abuses that have been occurring.
Great, thank you very much, Maria.
Thank you.